Welcome to the Afghanistan Project Podcast. I am your host, Beth Bailey, and my guests today are John Moses, Elizabeth Lynn, and Terry Symula, three incredible Americans involved in the effort to help Afghans abroad and at home. We're going to be talking about the ongoing fight for reunification between Afghans who were separated during the noncombatant evacuation operation and what must happen for Afghan refugees and Afghans awaiting transportation under the upcoming Trump administration. Without further ado, I'll introduce each of you in turn, starting with return guest John Moses. You guys have seen him often here. He is the co-founder of the Massachusetts Afghan Alliance, an organization that's supporting Afghan allies who have relocated around Massachusetts, which just got its 501c3 status, right, John?
We did. As a matter of fact.
Incredible. John, as you guys know, if you have listened, is also a 23-year veteran of the U.S. Army, a veteran fellow at the Hoover Institution, and the director of operations at Wizardline Technologies, Incorporated. Elizabeth Lynn is a new face here. She's the director of government operations at Operation Recovery, where she directs the Afghanistan and Grow America Farm Corps initiatives. Elizabeth served in the U.S. Air Force and the Navy Reserves and has received multiple commendations for her service. After holding a variety of positions with the U.S. Postal Service, USCIS, IRS, and other U.S. government institutions, Elizabeth retired in 2020, but then was pulled out of retirement shortly thereafter to help Afghans who were left behind in their homeland. Terry Symula is a volunteer at Afghanistan Care Alliance, where she leads a neighborhood support team that welcomes Afghan families in the area. In Terry's small town of Harvard, she was at one point supporting 36 Afghans. Her background is in computer technology sales and marketing management, and she actually began volunteering in the field of resettlement 8 years ago when she was supporting a Rwandan family who arrived in Worcester, Massachusetts in the middle of the winter, and they had numerous medical needs. So that sounded like an amazing story when you told me about it in your email, Terry, and if we have time, I'd love to hear about it today too. Thank you guys all for being here and for I think this is such an important topic, so I'm really excited to hear from you all and not so much from me tonight. I think the best way to get started is probably going to be to go around the table and do a really quick intro of how you guys got involved in this effort and your thoughts on where reunification. Actually, let's just start with how you got involved in the effort, and then we can start with reunification. So, John, we've heard from you before, so I'm going to actually say, Terry, can you start today?
Sure. Everybody that I know wanted to do something when we were watching the evacuation on television, and, hearts were breaking. And as you said, I had done some volunteer work with the Afghanistan Care Alliance, and they'd actually reached out and said, could I help? I'm like, yeah, sure. What would you like? Do you want me to raise money? Do you want me to open envelopes? What do you want me to do? But meanwhile, there was a dinner that was happening. And mind you, this was COVID. It was happening in the town next to Harvard, which is called Bolton, to raise money for the Bolton community to support one Afghan family. So it was a 30-person dinner, and I took my husband, and we walked in, and 10 of the people there were from Harvard. And we thought, maybe we could do something too. And we heard a very compelling speaker, a woman by the name of Elizabeth Davis Edwards, who was working with Centria to organize what then was called neighborhood support teams to welcome Afghan people. Centria was receiving very large families. I mean, families with 5 or 7 or 9, 12 kids, and big numbers. They resettled a large number of the people that came to Massachusetts. And so they needed help in finding housing and finding volunteers. And so we signed up originally to accept or to support a family, mother and father-to-be, that were expecting a baby in February. So that was going to be the Harvard family. However, there was an inn on the other side of our town that was closing, and the agency contracted with them to house people temporarily. And they had other people that were supporting them, but I was going to be the emergency contact at night because I would be the one who lived the longest or closest. Anyway, at one point there were 36 people there in addition to the other little family we had. And we still have 20 of those people today. After the inn closed, they were moving to Virginia. Then they were moving to Las Vegas. Then they announced they were staying. They lived in my church for a while we renovated a house for them. And now these 2 large families live in the center of town. right across the street from the school. And they're happily employed and a real part of our community. Our other little family did have a baby. It turned out she was not 20. She was 16. He was not 28. He was 24. And they have a lovely baby. Now they have a second, and they're living in Vermont, adjacent, really close to his sister and her family, which is where they were resettled. Wow. So almost 3 years ago. And we made a commitment to do this for 3 months. Because traditionally, that's what a resettlement agency offers. They offer 3 months of support. Much more was required. Let's go back for a second to the inn. We had, as I said, at one point we had 36 people staying there, none of whom spoke English. I would walk in every day and they would be looking at me like I was their case manager because they really hadn't seen anybody from the agency. And I knew they were unhappy. They couldn't communicate. At one point, a friend of mine whose husband speaks Urdu came with me because one of the dads from Afghanistan spoke a little Urdu. So I would speak to my friend. He would translate to Urdu. It would go to the father. It would go to the mother in Persian. And it was like the longest thing in the whole world to communicate. When the total was going to be 36, they called me and said, before they put the family of 12 there, they said, "Is this okay?" And I said, "No, I can't talk to these people. The translation lines are all crashing. They're frustrated. I'm frustrated." And they said, "Do you have any ideas?" And I said, "I do. I met a young man when I was meeting these families, and he helped me translate at the hotel. If I could just call him on the phone and get help, I maybe could do this." And they said, well, 2 days later, they called back and said, well, if he could come live at the inn too with his father, would that be all right? And I'm like, that would be absolutely fantastic. If they come now, I'll go get them. So that father and son team they're both just wonderful men. They left behind 7 children and the mom or the wife. And so it was very good for them to be with all of these people too. But it was very sad at the same time. They're watching all of these intact families, and they left behind their heart in Afghanistan.
Wow. And I know too, I'm assuming, because John told me that you are the only person he knows that has had a successful reunification case, Terry. Is that accurate, John? And so I want to hear about that later when we start talking about that reunification piece. I want to hear that story. I think that's really important. I can't imagine what they went through. What an incredible effort, Terry. It's really amazing to hear that. I really did have the shivers hearing you talk about them all, the successful cases living in the center of town. It's amazing. Elizabeth, how about you? Can you tell me about your involvement in this after you were pulled out of retirement?
Yeah. So my interpreter was still in Afghanistan. We communicated, I was there 2011, 2012. So we communicated frequently, and it was, he got married because he was very young. So he got married. He had 3 children. Life was normal. His wife was a teacher. He was still doing some work. He transitioned to the government. He was working for their version of the IRS. And, it seemed like everything was good. And then the summer of 2021, I started getting those frantic emails that, he had a special immigrant visa. He couldn't get it passed. He couldn't get the COM approval. There were some snags in it. He had left his, and it shows the difference in when you talk about the special immigrant visa, there's so many issues. There could, it's one of a million. With his, it was he had left work because his mom was in the hospital. So he couldn't get it approved because it looked like he had done something wrong. And in turn, what we did is I said, no, go to the hospital, get the records, show that your mom was in the hospital that day, submit that with your package. We'll do the new process. And he's now in California. So, we kicked butt with him and his family, his 3 children. They are here. And, it was the hardest 3 years getting him here, but he just got here in 2024. So
that is incredible. That's like, you never hear those stories.
No.
I got the chills again. You guys are killing me today. I love it.
So on top of that, you have these cases that are particularly close. They all matter so much. You give your all to so many cases. With Operation Recovery, we're tracking like 7,000 people. And then we have other people that come to us for help, and you assist. Whenever the call comes, you're there. If you have the knowledge, if you have the ability, if you have the time, you take it. But somebody from the Department of State had asked me to take on a family reunification case for an unaccompanied minor. And the minor was critically wounded in during the bombing, so he was evacuated without his family. It took us almost 3 years to get his family passports and get them here, but we did the same day. So I had a family reunification case of an unaccompanied minor land in Virginia at the same time that my interpreter was landing in California. So my heart was broken because I was in the middle of the country and I didn't see either of them land, but my heart was full because they both made it. So, you take the good with the bad and the wins when you can.
Yeah.
But, just it's things have shifted over time, and I'm sure we all see the pathways, and it started out for me that I was special immigrant visa, and that was it. Like, this is my interpreter, he needs to be here. And then the more cases you hear, the more stories that are told, the more you realize, wait a minute, the P1 pathway, family reunification, what can we do to make these things go smoother, faster, and more efficient? How can we fix the problems? Let's get rid of the bugs. Let's do it. So and that's what the organizations did. The NGOs stepped up and said, here's what we can fix. Here's what we can improve. And that's kind of the last 3 years for me has been, let's get people here that are eligible. Let's help them. Let's be truthful. Let's tell them the truth. Let's be honest and upfront. All of this ambiguity is driving me crazy, when they don't want to talk about family reunification. And it goes back to when P1s, there was a policy, but there wasn't a procedure, right? So we knew what was going to happen, but we didn't know when it was going to happen, and how it was going to take effect and what priority people were going to fall in. And we seem to be going through the same thing right now with family reunification. And I think that's the biggest heartache to most of us, is that we want to be honest with people and tell people exactly what's happening, and it's hard to do that.
I can't even imagine. John, how about you? And then we'll just delve right into family reunification after you're done.
Yeah, for sure. And I'll talk a little bit. I mean, people kind of, I've been on the show before. First of all, I want to say that Terry is really understating how much work and effort she's put into it. I mean, she's brought actual state level earmarks into her community to help renovate and housing. And she's been an incredible ally for me and helps me all the time with stuff. So she also had helped a local girl host an art exhibit too, Beheshta. So she had this art exhibit she did with a local artist, and Elizabeth helped me. Both of them helped me actually. And Terry helped me with my American case, the two American kids. So, but how I got involved in this started in the evac. We part of a group, helped a bunch of people through the airport. Continued to do the work, and when Afghans started arriving in Massachusetts, I noticed that some landed with people like Terry in Harvard, right? And this, and then some people landed in Lowell with nobody, right? And so there was a big disparity in the treatment of, or the way people kind of arrived in the United States. And as I started meeting people and going to different towns and going to Concord, Mass, one of the most important cities and towns in the whole country, there were Afghans there, and there were people that had no idea what to do. They hadn't heard of people like Afghan Evac or, Evacuate Our Allies. These are people like Terry and other families, but not everybody's so educated on it. So people started finding me, and it was a lot of them were around reunification families, because they would be like, oh, this guy's worked with reunification. At least he knows something. At least he has a connection with the government. And there was two in my town. There are now 3 reunification families in my town. There are 2 in Lowell, which is right over there. They're the cases that you and I are working on. So the reunification cases were there, and they required a really much more aggressive set of measures to keep them healthy, right? So you're going out there, you're making sure they have information. They're constantly asking about their family. And for people like us that actually talk to the government, they think they send photos, they do all the things they did during evac. They don't really integrate well into school, and there's a lot of problems around reunification that don't get fixed without the rest of the family. So that's been our focus for the last few years, and we're making progress. I don't know. We'll see. So there's some unknowns coming up, but right now we're just working really hard to figure out where people are on the list. Try to get as many people into the IOM process as possible, so they're in the system. But that's how I get started. That's what I'm doing now, and I do a lot of local work. So I do a lot of local work. We do events. We do whatever we can to make Afghans feel more welcome and to be part of the community in Massachusetts.
Amazing. Okay. So I was going to ask about the struggles that reunification cases are facing, but before that, sorry for that, I'm gotta get comfy here. I want to talk about. I've heard a lot of rumors, right? And I'm really mad. Let me just have a little aside here for a minute. Like, I'm mad I didn't meet you earlier, John, because I had no idea about the reunification cases.
Right.
I was covering P1, P2, HP, SIV, and trying to understand that whole insanity that is really difficult to comprehend and to track, because there's a lot of non-answering from the U.S. government. They don't want you to know how many people they've turned down for HP or why it's taking so long to process P1, P2. Tell me what's happening with reunification. Like, where are we? I know that there are a lot of people who are very concerned about the cases that are ongoing. Does anyone even know how many reunification cases there are currently? None.
So, I mean, I'll be really honest. I've been learning a lot in the past few months. I've gotten access to some calls, and we've had a chance. And Elizabeth's been on these calls. She's asked similar questions that I have. We've asked these types of questions, and really, after a lot of, we've had a call. I'll be really honest, where they not only did not answer questions, they actively avoided them on reunification. And what it comes to find out, they did eventually answer the question in the chat that was what I think is the problem, is that outside of unaccompanied minors, they didn't track other reunification cases. They just ended up in the big pool. So as far as CARE was concerned, once the person got to the U.S., they were no longer CARE's responsibility. Now the family in Afghanistan is their responsibility, but they're not getting any kind of priority. Never mind priority. I would have settled for just tracking, like how many are there, all that kind of stuff, and they just put them in a big pool. And they arrived in communities and really unsupported and uncommunicated to for almost 3 years, other than automated emails, which we've talked about the response to automated emails I've seen. So, but I'll kind of defer there. So I'll stop there. And I'd love to hear Elizabeth's take on it, because she's much more on the policy side and kind of works with those people. But on my side, as an NGO, I mean, the answers aren't there. And we're actually doing some work within I've reached out to Senator Markey's office. I'm writing an op-ed for the Boston Globe right now. Well, hopefully they take it about this specific topic. And hey, tell me at least where the Massachusetts reunification case is, right? Like, tell me how many we have. And so with that, I'll kind of pause. Thanks, Elizabeth.
Yeah, it's the same. We get the numbers on the unaccompanied minors. That's a good number. It's up there. So it's really, it's excellent but we have to remember that the ones that aren't here yet probably don't have passports, or there's something in that case that's stopping it. What we would like to hear is, then where does the priority lie? What is the priority of the administration, and, who's next on that list? Because I'd rather tell somebody that, this is what we're working on. I can't give you a timeline. We've never given timelines because things come up all the time. But, we would like to know where we are with family reunification. Because I have babies that were born in 2021 that, don't even know who their other parent is. Absolutely. I have kids that say, you're not my mom or you're not my dad because you're not in my life, basically. A kid doesn't know any better. So you have, the men and the women that are here, hearing that, but they're doing everything that they know and reaching out to every person that they know to try to put their family back together. Unfortunately, it's not happening. It's not happening at a pace that matches the P1 process, or the refugee process. It's also, what I see, I tend to call it a closed loop. We know who these people are. We know these numbers. There's a list. They know who got on the military aircraft. So, we should be working to close this loop, right? Because it's a known number. The P1s will go on. Hopefully the SIVs will go on and continue processing. But we know who these people are. And the other thing to kind of consider, because there's people that, are pro, like I was at first, the SIVs, like we need to get them here. And then you start to open your eyes and you're aware of more things that were told to people. Just like the unaccompanied minor, they said, your family will be on the next plane, trying to console him. And then you have different groups of people that said, get on this plane, your life is in danger, your family will follow. Yeah. And, so we're dealing with a lot of those words and trying to put together the reason why your family, they're not here. Trying to console people, trying to keep hope alive. We want people to remain positive. We don't want them to go down into some negative, hole. But we need to know what's going on. And the government was really good at the beginning. I was just counting the calls before this, how many, calls we were on. And like in 2022, you could average, I don't know, 4, maybe 5 calls a month just with government agencies. It dwindled in 2023. Like I have 44 calls. And then this year so far, the year is almost over, I'm at 19. Now, some calls I took while I was on vacation and they're in a binder or something like that with my notes, but I have a running list of almost 300 pages of notes. And we don't have what we had before. And now we're getting into family reunification. So we need to regenerate those calls and those discussions. We need to know what's happening because we're talking to people on the ground. We hear their stories and their sadness. And we just need to be honest and upfront with people. But we also need to know what's going on.
100%. Terry, I would like to hear from you about the case of the son and father who were in that home and what you saw them go through.
They're both the loveliest men, but really what happened was that the son really began to become the father in the family because the father was so sad and it was just a burden. And I think about it, this young guy was 23 years old and we were using him to translate be interpret for all of the different, unsettled folks that were trying to settle here. At the same time, he's trying to keep the spirits up of his father who, is having a difficult time missing his wife and 7 other children. The youngest child was 3 and the next in age was 6. And his sadness was, will they even ever remember me? Fortunately, we have technology where they can, see each other and talk every day, but that's certainly not the same as sitting on their dad's lap and getting snuggles. So together, the men both worked at the same company at Devon's, which is a job engine near where we live. It's a military base that's been redeveloped, and there are good jobs there. And they both worked at night so that they could make that much more money to save for welcoming their family, which added to their lack of happiness during the day. They functioned sort of without enough sleep, and over time they stayed with us about 1.5 years. They stayed at that inn, and then they lived with one of our team members. She goes away for part of the year to France. Wouldn't that be nice for all of us? But anyway, she made her home available to them, and then they lived with us for free so they could continue to stay in different families. And then they eventually moved to Worcester because the young son, he deserved to have a social life and hanging around with all these kids and working with his dad all night long. So at any rate, so they're in Worcester. But it was just hard to watch and not be able to do anything for them, to invite them to things and have them be part of all the things that were going on here, but how hard for them to see these happy families, and theirs was left behind.
Yeah.
Could you see that in their faces and in
Oh,
their
especially
body?
the dad, and even the son. He was trying to be the man of the house, for his dad and bear all the burdens and, pay all the bills and take care of all the things that need to be taken care of. I'm not a clinician, but I think it'd be fair to say that, they were depressed, just trying to get through. And when they were made aware that the family was coming, not all of them could come because the two older ones aged out, and the program's only available up to the age of 21. So there are two sons that are still in Afghanistan. They're in a reasonably good position. One of them is a dentist now, and the other one is going to school to be a dentist. But it breaks the mom's heart. She's here, and two of her sons are left behind. But I've never seen the dad so happy as I did when he saw his family. And they had a small apartment in Worcester because, of course, they're saving money, right, to welcome their family. And they needed to get a bigger apartment, which they were lucky to get. And strange, I don't know if this happens all the time, but they were resettled by an agency in Springfield, Massachusetts, not anywhere near us. And I was thinking, how is this going to go? Because how are these services going to happen, right? That they're entitled to when they come. And I called the agency and asked why. And she said we had a whole stack of cases. And we looked at this one and we said, well, it's only 70 miles from here. They didn't know what would happen if they said no. They didn't know how much longer the family would be apart. So they accepted it. And they're far, so we've done a lot of registering for school here and getting other things taken care of for the agency because we know how to do it. We've done it before. So there, and even we're sending members from our team go out every week to the mom. The mom's lovely, but never been to school, and that's the case of all the women that we've greeted and that we've welcomed. So one of our team members goes out every Tuesday and works with her, and one of the boys to help them. He's 22. He turned 22 now. Again, done with school in Afghanistan, but no English. There are two teenagers, one in grade. Let's see, one in grade 11, one in grade 12. No, one in grade 10, one in grade 11, and then two in elementary school. So it's a happy house in Worcester, a little bit crowded, but very, very happy. I wish they could be here. I just don't have another house to renovate for them. But they're doing okay.
So I want to understand more about the Springfield. So you moved them from Springfield. They didn't
Well, the
have to
agency
go.
was in Springfield, and
Okay.
actually, I had them come to my house and live at my house for a while
Gosh.
because I couldn't see that they should go to a hotel while they were getting their permanent residence, figured out and furnished and all of that. So I live relatively close to where the guys work. So they have a longer commute. Zarif, who's the son, has actually gone to work for a resettlement agency in Worcester. The dad is still working the job that he was working. And so it's about 35 minutes for him each way to go to work. And it's about 10 minutes from my house. So we welcomed them here, and we had them, I don't remember how long, but we had them long enough that Don came to dinner one night, and the state senator came to dinner another night. And, we had like party central here for a couple weeks. Anyway, so after that, they moved. But it was just so happy to see them all together at my dinner table, at my dining room table, which I only use a couple times a year. I was using it every night, right, to see all these people. So to have it's such joy, such joy, and the kids are doing great, and it's a heartwarming story. But this is another concern, and I'll just throw it out there, and you can edit it. One of the concerns, though, is when the young men do come to this country, how to get them on a reasonable career track. And it's not going well for a lot of teenage boys that come like at 16 years old, 17 years old. They're so late coming to learn English. The programs are really not successful for them. If you go to school in Worcester, you might be in a class with 8 other languages represented, and lots of the kids are not necessarily competing. You can go to school here till you're 23 and get a diploma, but what kid wants to be in high school until they're 23?
Yeah.
So that's one of the challenges, is trying to keep them on the right track and on a track to opportunity.
I'm sure that I can absolutely understand that. I don't want to edit that out either. I think that's really important if that's okay with you.
Well, you'll be honored to know that when they arrive, they think they should go right into the service. Wow.
Yeah.
I believe it, but how does that work? You have to be a citizen, or I mean, there are
They
places
could
where
go
you
in, but
can go become.
but they should graduate from high school first.
Okay, I got you. Yes,
And the
yes,
service likes to
absolutely.
see something maybe even into college so that you have made a
Sure,
commitment and they see
sure.
that, you have skills to bring. Because it's in Afghanistan, apparently it's not a difficult thing to get into the army. Here, there are standards more that are higher, as they
As
should.
somebody that was in Afghanistan, I can attest to that for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah.
So, and like one of the young men, not the one who was reunified recently, when we were trying to register him for school, he goes, I'm done. I'm done. I'm like, oh, not here, you're not. Not really. Anyway,
Oh, yeah, I mean, and then that could become a great path to citizenship, right? Isn't
yes. Yeah, there's a
yeah,
path to
I
citizenship if
mean,
you serve. Oh, there is today. Let's
yeah.
hope it stays, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
let's hope that. I want to ask one more question. If you don't, actually, I have like so many questions for you. But the one for right now would be women. You talked about women, and that's always something. I met my friend Michael, who used to do the co-host this podcast with me. I met his interpreter, and his wife was just the most lovely person. But she's still, it's the struggle. She didn't speak any English, so she couldn't talk with us. And there are the cultural, norms and all these things. And I have such a heart for how difficult that must be to acclimate to a society where everything is just so different, and to learn, and to, especially if you only have one car, and the wage earner needs that car. So what is being done to help women become acclimated?
Well, I actually think our women are doing better than our men.
Wow.
And I think that's, we're lucky because I think we have two families, right, living in the town. And the two women are like sisters. And we have volunteers that work with them and go out, more than maybe three times a week, and work with them on English or take them places and have them experience things. The women are not afraid to make mistakes in their language. They speak. They call me on the phone. They really want to learn, and I'm trying to get them into some ESL classes. Their English now is better than their husbands. The husbands just don't want to. I think they understand maybe more, but they don't speak much, and they don't have to do much for their jobs. But I do say you like one of the men. He used to be a chef at the Intercontinental Hotel in Kabul. In fact, he managed all the restaurants there, and very successful. And then the army brought him over, and I don't remember the name of John, where he worked in Kabul for the.
New Kabul compound. He worked at NKC. That was a.
So he was kind of a big deal, and but here he works in the school cafeteria,
Oh,
and
wow.
he does fine. And he can walk to work, and it's great. It's just right across the street. But he says, "I want a better job." I said, "Well, he said, people, I understand." I said, "Yes, honey, though people have to understand you, and they don't. So you're not going to be a manager until people can understand you." But the women are amazing. I mean, we were totally prepared for them to be depressed because we did lots of, the agency took us through lots of, depression, this and that. Oh no, they're skipping around town. They're not under the thumb of their mother-in-laws anymore.
Heck yes, that is a huge thing. I was just talking about that with Lynn O'Donnell, about just the amount of oppression that Afghan women face when they marry.
Yeah.
Because it's not just the husband, it's the mother-in-law and the female relatives who are just going to come at her like a freaking baseball team.
And they're smart. They're very smart. They now they go to the grocery store. They're entitled to some benefits for food. They know how to do that. They scan. They know their budget. They know their money. They're really amazing. And you ask the girls. We have this is not about the Reunification family, which I'm just getting to know. But there's only one daughter in that family. She's in second grade, but I imagine her the wife might have been the same for this mom. But our two women are just anxious to get to work eventually, to drive a car eventually. They see, and we have the way that these families worked out. So fortunately, we ended up having 4 what would be seniors who graduated last year from high school. They really didn't graduate. They had certificates of accomplishment. But the girls passed the English MCAS, which is the standardized test that you need to graduate. The boys did not show up that day. The girls are at a junior college right now taking an intense English. So there's one from each family, and there's one from each family of the boys. They're at Job Corps, which is going great for them too. They are doing really well there. But you say to the girls, who runs the family? And they both say, Mom.
Mm-hmm.
Who's
100%.
smarter, Mom or Dad? Mom.
That's a real culture thing too in the
It
Afghan
is.
culture, the mom. So like there's a story I don't know if I like to tell it, but we had a guy we were trying to get him out of Afghanistan. He was a green card holder. This is during the evacuation, and he wouldn't leave his mom. His mom was older. He's like, I can't leave my mom. She'll be alone. Da, da, da. And I said, well, ask your mom what she thinks. And his mom's like, "You're out of Afghanistan. Like, what are you doing? Like, leave. And the guy's done great, but he wouldn't have left without permission from his mom. There's no way. Yeah, it's a very important part of the culture for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But it's hard if it's your mother-in-law.
Yeah, no, the mother-in-law is a different thing. But I just wanted to comment on what you said. I think it's interesting. One of the things I often tell people is Afghan women know what's up. Like they show up here and they are like ready to work. They like show up and they're 19 years old. I want a GED. If they're in high school, how do I do this to get to college? Like who do I talk to? Afghan women absolutely understood what they were leaving and what they were arriving into, and they have they have the ability to drive and do all these things. And now and with they're seeing what's happening to the friends and the family that are still there with the woman there, and I think they really get it. Afghan women are amazing, just straight up. Our co-founder is an Afghan woman for.
Yeah, I would also tell whoever's listening here that the care team at Doha has set up an excellent gender program for women and girls. I was lucky enough to visit it a couple of months ago and see it in action. It was an amazing thing to just observe. And there's classes there for just, basic skills, sewing or, just basic, I need to keep busy kind of skills. But then they have like occupational training, they have computer training, they have ESL classes. And these are all taught by Afghan Americans, so they can relate to the people that are there. That when they go into the classroom, people understand them and the issues that they're facing, which is so very important. And, just seeing the amount of, just to be able to come into society again after being shut down for 3 years and knowing that there's a team behind you setting you up for success. And then when you get here, there's people here and the resettlement agencies and just in the communities that want to set you up for success as well. That is the good stuff, even though we know what's happening in Afghanistan. Sometimes you have to pinpoint what's happening that's positive. And I would say that, the training and the education and the programs that they have at Doha really do help.
I bet you the women take really good advantage of them too.
They do. It's amazing.
Yeah.
And the kids, the conversations that they had. And, one of the things that we noticed in every classroom that we went into were the girls saying, but what are you going to do about my friends in Afghanistan? What are you going to do about my friends at home, my family members at home? And their goal in life is to fix it. They're moving forward and they're moving on and, they have bright futures, but they're not going to forget, where their home is.
No. And there is so much to still do there. But I wanted to hear, Elizabeth, what about the reunification cases you worked on? What did it look like from your angle, that loss, of part of the family?
So we have families in India and Turkey and Pakistan and Afghanistan and, different places all over the world where people have gotten out. When I look at things, I'm like, okay, we aren't told of a focus point, but this would be a great one to focus on, the families that you can move quickly and efficiently. And at the same time, keep working towards a pathway out of Afghanistan for these families. But, when I talk to a dad and a husband here that's waiting on his family, his wife and children, he won't go sit down at a restaurant because he would have to watch all the other families there. So in the 3 years that he's been here, he does not want to go out to eat. He does not want to go experience anything that's fun, because he does not want his family to think that, number one, he's doing something that they cannot, and then he doesn't want to do things that he cannot do with them. So that's what drives a lot of this depression, is just the inability to act as if you have a family. And even the calls are hard, because, you know, when your children are crying or your wife is struggling and you know it's bad, how do you, you know, stop the world for a minute to help them when you can't?
Right.
So how do you make it right? And you know, that's one of the things that, you know, I see over and over again, is that, you know, the people that are here aren't able to move forward because their families are not here yet.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I often say they don't resettle. They don't resettle. So they're here. Mm-hmm. They concentrate and focus on their families that are in Kabul. And just like you said, we have families that won't go outside. And I've told you this on another podcast, but I'll say it again on their other one. But one of the things that I see when we talk about communication and them not speaking to those reunification families, many families and volunteers, because this is actually a little bit different, because they're here, so they also affect the communities around them, the schools, all these things. But they won't participate in anything, right? So they won't show up for anything. They won't go to go out to get food. And they're just here, like watching the world go by. They don't believe that the care system knows they exist. They don't believe PRM or they don't care who any of them are at this point. And when you're like, hey, but trust me, they see you, and they've had 3 automated emails, right? And that was kind of what I was going to talk about. Is one of the things I actually saw, a thing I see besides depression, is anger and anxiety. There was this one family that was separated at Abbey Gate. It was an explosion at Abbey Gate. One part of the family went one way, the other part goes the other way. He's actually he's not Hazara, he's Panjshiri. So regardless, he gets these emails and he starts responding to them. So we check his emails sometimes, and it's like, here's your automated, your documentarily complete, and then under it are dozens of emails from this human being being like, give me my family. Like, who are you? Do you exist? Like, help. And I think that's the biggest thing for me in the past years, and what I would like to see going forward. Right? Like, we don't know what's going to come in with the new administration, but if we could find a way to communicate with these families as a class, and on calls I used to say it, they would always say refugee resettlement, and I would always come back and be like, refugee resettlement, reunification. It needs to be its own thing, and we have been bad at it, not just in this war. We have been bad at it in Vietnam and in Cambodia and Laos and all these other different places. So that's all I got.
No, it isn't.
I know it's definitely not all that John has. But you're right. And I'm, like I said before, I'll say it again. I wish I had known about that earlier, because I would have started pressing on that earlier and asked and made all the government apparatuses hate me more than they already do.
Yeah, well, I think it was building out. So, the P1 process was NEO timeframe.
Yeah.
Then the family reunification, building out a process, so it's a government, and, and we were all patient. So we were all waiting on this, so excited when the DS 4317 came out, telling everybody to do it. But, you're only as successful as long as you can reach every Afghan that's eligible for reunification. So, I think the State Department, the different organizations, that are helping Afghans, different agencies, multiple across USCIS, across the spectrum. But, we reach people through the NGOs. But we can reach people, but we can't reach everybody. So who's not being told of the process and what needs to happen? And that's where knowing so everybody that came in got a 994, everybody that came in was on a list. So why did we have to reach out to people to tell them to fill out the DS 4317? Why wasn't there automated, you're eligible to fill this out as long as you meet this, but this should have went directly to the applicants.
Yes.
And then we're being told different things that even lawyers know. So I'm like, why isn't there a telegram that goes to the lawyers that says the same things we hear in these calls, so that we're all on the same page, because I can't tell you how many times I've told a lawyer, that's not the way we're doing it, or that's not the information that you should, yes, that's not how we are doing this. And then they look at you like, what do you mean you're telling me this isn't how we do it? This is how immigration works. And we're like, this is a new form and you need to put this in this blank so that it goes through, or filing the I-730. So everybody wanted to file the I-730 at first. And then, it was like, do this or do that. So we're getting all this information and we're being fed it pretty frequently on all these calls, but that same information is not going out to the immigration attorneys in the states. So, what we get is one thing. We get this big pool of information, which, by the way, has dwindled a lot. But we get this big pool of information, and then we pass it to the Afghans. And then you have the Afghan telling the lawyer, well, no, that's not what I'm supposed to do. Right. And then the lawyer's telling them, but this is what we're going to do. And then we're like, no, don't do that. So you have this kind of, I'm not a lawyer, and, I can't tell anybody that I'm a lawyer and this is what you should do. But then I'm like, okay, just give me your lawyer's information. And then I go direct to the lawyer and I said, on this date, we were told to do this. On this date, we were told to do this, So but what I don't understand is we're making this great effort to, for this public-private partnership and, the NGOs and the agencies working together. But we also need to remember that there's immigration attorneys that have been assigned to these people all across the United States that aren't getting the same information.
Just quickly, I want to say that we have our immigration attorney that we work with all the time. She's a good friend of mine. She asked me to come to her office to update her on care stuff because I have no idea what's going on. Like, I'll give you an example, the 4317, right? I actually still, every once in a while, it's been about a month, but find an Afghan that's like, what's a 4317?
Yes.
Yes. And I'm like, you got to do this. And it's not great. So I just think, it just made me think of that. But it's interesting that this lawyer, she's part of a listserv group, and she's like, you come in and you update me on things, and I go to this listserv, and I'm not an immigration attorney, right? And I'm giving not advice, but and I'm providing notes and
updates. We're giving updates. Yeah.
But they don't understand I just found out the other day because I had never had a case go far enough in reunification. Because somebody kind of gave me crap because it went from, I didn't know when you sent the 4317 in, which would be a great tracking tool, by the way. When you send it in, it's only received and then submitted. And all of a sudden people got submitted. I was like, we submitted that thing 2 years ago. And then none of us knew what it meant. The lawyer didn't know what it meant. And we were all like, what does that mean? And it turns out that means it's submitted to PRM. But that is not published anywhere. They don't tell you. So
the other thing that was happening with the DS 4317, since we're talking about family reunification, and that's the one form that'll get you going until you can do the I-730, I-130, or all those other forms, I-24, there's so many different ways. But for the specific family reunification and the DS 4317, one of our guys that's been trying to get his wife and 4 children here received an email that said basically from the care team. So the care team is getting all of his documentation. They're collecting everything. They do a really good job of weeding through a lot of emails, like you were talking about, John, the 1 for 100, you get one email and then it's, constant. But, what they got was an email stating, we're not working on your case because it was early in the case. But, the person on the receiving end of that email doesn't understand this. And it essentially told him to work with the agency he was working with previously. Yeah. Which was CARE, but that's where we need to know that information, that USCIS is working with CARE to collect the documents to start that initial process. Because, to the Afghan reading that, it's like saying, hey, we're not tracking you. Go back to somebody else. And, how do you justify saying that and causing that level of concern? And I'm like, no, don't worry about it. This is just, let me do some research here. And come to find out, we found out that his case is being, going through the motions, but it was just a really bad way of saying it. So, that's the other thing that I would stress here is that, letting us know these things and not trying to do everything on their own. Because we have the ability to reach out to people to say, wait a minute, let's assess this, let's fix it. The same with the I-730s and as they move through the process. we just realized that they're getting emails, and they, these families are large, right? You have some with 12 people in the family. So they're getting KBLs without a name attached. So they're getting a case number assigned. And the person in the United States they'll get like, 6, 7, 8 emails in a row that this is their case number, but there's no family member. So, if we want to improve comms going to the agencies need to improve the comms coming to the applicant. Yeah. And that's a really big deal when you're talking about the masses, because as they get assigned numbers, they need to know who that number is attached to. And it's different from MVC. So it's USCIS, you get the receipt, right? Yeah. So you get the IOE, the document with the receipt number, the person, the sponsor. Like, you have all this detailed information on a receipt. But then once it goes to MVC, it's like, okay, here's your KBL.
Yeah.
To who? Like, what family member does this belong to? And how do you want us to send, communication about this case? Hey, this is a ghost person, here's their KBL number, but I just don't know who it's assigned to. I just know it's a family member. Yeah. So that, but the cool thing is that we've been working with these agencies for so long now that we can go directly to them and say, hey, this is the problem that we're seeing. Can we fix it? And they're usually pretty good about, responding in a short amount of time saying, oh, yes, we'll look at that, So we've built a lot of relationships over time on the family reunification process, but we just need to, the communication needs to be there, and we need to continue it in a better fashion.
And I'm just listening to the volume of work that you have all done. It's like, I am never not astounded by how much of this effort has been done by people who do not work for the government. And like, without all of you, what would have happened? And in fact, I want to transition, because there's a case that you all were touching on at this point. And I want to hear that from start to go before we close tonight.
Can I put my 2 cents in on that case really quickly?
Yes.
I said, what do you mean he had a baby in Afghanistan? That's how I came into this whole conversation.
So,
oh my gosh. Okay, wait. Let's back up.
Yeah, you got to get to the
I'm lost already again. Now, hold on. Let's start from the. Yeah.
Want to start from the Neo? I could start at the Neo.
Yeah, you start at the Neo.
I forget how I met the Sadat family. I can say their name. Can I say their name? I mean,
you just did.
Yeah.
I think it's okay. I think it's okay.
Like Smith, like a Smith. So we'll just say the Sadat family. So I forget how I met the Sadat family, but what I knew when I met them is that they had 2 American kids. And so he wanted to get out with his whole family. So although he had an opportunity to go out through the U.S. gate when it was available, he chose not to. So there were choices definitely made. But then over the next days, we tried to get that family and the wife, and we also tried to get his elderly mother and sisters out. It was really difficult. There was wheelchairs involved, a lot of people working on it. He had No One Left Behind was actually one of the people working on it, was one of those groups, and a few others. So after multiple attempts, including this 8.5-month pregnant wife sitting at the gate and doing all the terrible gate stuff, they never got out, right? We did snatch missions. Those were one of the ones we were doing snatch missions with. We had cars picking them up and doing all this crazy stuff. At the end of the day, the gate closed. And I'm like, well, how hard is it going to be to get him out? It's all green card holders and 2 American citizens, right? And then the baby was born. And then Elizabeth with Oprico in their whole group. So,
yeah. So then the conversation started with Amy, she's a lawyer in the UK, and I believe, and so there was like all these conversations going, and when John the other day brought up Omar's name and the baby, and I was just like, oh my goodness, I know this case. But, and it's that kind of cross-pollination where as organizations, we've worked so well together across the board, and we've relied on each other for multiple families, information, movement, food, humanitarian aid, like you name it. One of our family reunification cases, they were like, when you can deliver food to a family, that means something. And to us, it's like this, it's like this little bit of effort that we can apply that means the world to somebody else. And it's so valuable, and that I just, you can't define the thanks that you get, you know, when you're able to see children eating food.
Mm-hmm.
And you think about the family reunification cases, and some of the background and some of the stories. It's truly a hardship. It's a global hardship because you have people suffering here in the United States. And then the same thing goes to the people that are in other countries across the world. But I always go back to this as a known number and a closed loop, and we just need to close it.
Amen. Amen.
Terry, when did you get involved with that case?
Well, John called me and he said this was happening, and he didn't have any place for them to live, and he didn't know how. He had a place maybe in a month, but he didn't have any place in the short term. And did I have any ideas about that? And so a friend of mine was in Florida for the winter, so I reached out to her, and she said she'd be open to it, but her homeowners association, she's over 55, and it's a homeowners thing being over 55. But anyway, so that's where they went. And so I took my Afghan teenagers with me. We went to the Indian market and we bought all this food to have them there. When they arrived, and big welcome signs and American balloons, and John went and got them at the New Hampshire airport. And it's so crazy because they took them from New York to New Hampshire, driving right by our house. Like, I don't know quite why that happened.
It would not stop.
No.
Go to the airport.
So John had 2 cars with him, a truck, because there's so much luggage. They're bringing everything, including the kitchen sink from Afghanistan. And anyway, so they stayed there. And so the next day, I took the dad shopping. And he said the only thing I didn't buy them was eggs. And their kids haven't had an egg in 5 months, but one a week. And it was a hard-boiled egg and they were in Qatar I never know if it's Qatar, whatever. They were there for 5 months because their case was confusing. So I said, well, guess what? One day you'll remind them that they would be happy. They were happy with just an egg. They'll be Americans soon, and that won't matter.
Can I just add to that? Really interesting too. They were in Qatar for way longer than I thought they should have been. I thought when they got to Qatar they would be treated differently because they had 2 citizens in the group. They had to wait in every IOM line. They had to wait they did not get anything special. And then they tried. So only the baby was getting assured, right? Only the baby was getting accepted into the United States because everybody else had already been in the system. The craziest thing, and the reason Terry ended up getting a call, is because Catholic Charities called me and said, we're not assuring one baby, and can you take them? And I remember thinking this active thought process being, okay, their green cards expire in 3 months. If I say no, and I was like, yes, yeah, I'll assure you. And then we hung up, and they're like, great, all his mail's coming to your house. And I was like, Terry, I need help. Like, I don't know. But there was no way I was going to leave those. And I know the whole family is important, but there's a real duty and obligation to do everything you can to help American citizens, which I think we could have done a better job getting him here faster, to be really, really honest. I think there were some steps missed, but we have such an obligation to those U.S. citizens, and I was just never going to give up on them. And now they're down in, just to give you a quick update, I don't know if Terry heard, but they did go to Virginia against Third Vice, struggled mightily for a while, and I guess they met a church and they went in and asked for help, and this church kind of adopted them, and they're doing much better.
Yeah, and a member of our team brought them the rest of their luggage about a month ago or so.
Can we talk about luggage they brought?
I'm sorry, what?
They brought like 72 bags.
Yeah, and they couldn't put it on the MTAC chain. But here's just an example of what a small town can do. They came to us, even though they were only going to stay a couple of weeks. The superintendent of school said, yeah, have them go to school. They went to school immediately. The Afghan families that were in town brought them dinner one night, brought them dinner the next night. But not the funniest thing, the day that this family arrived, the day after, the mom told me she had a health issue. And of course, they haven't been signed up for mass help yet. They don't have, it wasn't going to be, we spent all day in the emergency room is really what it amounted to. And so I bring her back that night, and they attended to her the best they could. And then we're going to follow it up, and she ended up being okay. But so this is like Friday night at nearly midnight. I'm bringing her home, and I say to them, well, I'll come by in the morning and I'll bring the kids to meet my other Afghan kids. They can play in the playground. They can have a good time. And they say, oh, we have family coming tomorrow. I'm like, you have family here? They said, yeah, well, we don't know them. But yeah, we have family coming and they're coming in the morning. I say, okay, well, that's great. All right, I'll check in with you later. And then John calls me mid-afternoon or something, and he says that he's going over and could I meet him there? I said, oh, this will be nice. They've had family come today. So we go over there, and he's brought him a computer, and we're talking about their concerns and whether they should stay here or they should go to Virginia or what should happen. And then now we're getting ready to leave. The doorbell rings. The family's just arriving. They hadn't come all day.
Yeah.
And then we walk in, and they've got food. And then the woman says, Terry, how are you? I'm like, excuse me? She knew me. Because when we first had our large Afghan families, the big number of them, how are you going to dress all those people? They came with literally nothing. So we set up a shop in the ground floor of one of our churches in town. It was beautiful. We set it up like the Gap. It was a sunny room and carpet on the floor, and we organized things by size, and everything was brand new or gently used. And people, our folks got clothed that way. So how are you going to take 16 kids shopping? Right? I don't have a Prius, right? Minivan days are over. So then once we closed our families, we started opening it up to the Worcester families. And so the NSTs in Worcester would bring their families. So this indeed was one of those families that had come out and gone shopping. And I didn't recognize her because when I saw her last, she was very pregnant and she was having a baby. Well, now she had the baby in her arms, and she was, so they didn't know their family, but I knew their family. So anyway, it's just a small world thing. But they couldn't get their kids in school. They moved to Virginia shortly before Easter. They couldn't get their kids in school in Virginia until the new school year because they didn't have a permanent place. They were staying with family, and it was a rent subsidized sort of situation. They were 2 bedrooms for one family, one for the other. They had 4 kids, And they went to a church. They're Muslim, they're not Christian, but they were able to befriend a community, and they began to help them. And then they got their own apartment, and she's working, he's working, she's driving, he's driving. The kids love school. We had a team member go down, as I said, she and her husband brought them all their things, and they went to different events with them, and they said they're very happy and they're very settled in. So it took a while, but
that's awesome.
I just think it's inexcusable, though, that they would not, I don't know that everyone realizes this in the greater listening community, but every time I talk to an Afghan who's, say, in Pakistan, their kids aren't going to school. They're not allowed to. They're refugees.
India's the same way.
Yeah. And Afghanistan, there was a whole pause. I didn't even realize that it wasn't just like during COVID, they couldn't go to school, a lot of Afghans, from what I've understood. So some of these kids could have been out of school for years.
Yeah, this couple, they just didn't, I think they couldn't register because it wasn't their permanent
Sure,
place.
And I do comprehend that, but it's like,
yeah,
oh my goodness,
I know.
Let's figure out how to make that happen here in the greatest country, like let's get them into school.
Yeah,
when you think about that, and you think about family reunification, and one of the things that we're struggling with is housing, the assurance process and getting people here. But looking at family reunification and those families, a lot of these guys are working. They have homes. There's nothing to assure. They have young children that don't need to be go through the multiple stages of vetting, because these are like 2, 3, 4, 5, they're young children. But, you're talking, we have Delta pilots, we have engineers, we have people that work 3 jobs, we have people that Uber, Lyft, and, multiple delivery services just to save money, but they have an apartment. So, there are, is there a way we can look at family reunification in a way that we can also assure these families here, in a fast-paced way? Because they would go right into the home and not, 70 miles away, or, the same with the unaccompanied minor in that situation. They were played, the son couldn't drive yet, but they were placed almost an hour apart.
Yeah.
Because of housing.
Housing
So
is
the
a
parents
problem.
live separate from the children, the two kids that got out. So, it's still a heartbreaking situation, but at least everybody's here. They're on bus routes. They get to visit, there is a driver in the family. So, but when you think about it, and all the families that we're trying to, reunify, we're looking at the ability to assure them immediately into a home.
Yeah.
When they come, do they come through an agency, or are they privately sponsored, or how is it working?
So we actually are doing the Welcome Corps.
Okay.
John's in the huge discussions with that, and one of our Operation Recovery volunteers is our coordinator. I did it because military benefits, that's back up. So anybody listening to this, check Welcome Corps, because the military, the veteran funding is back.
I'm on one of those
but
teams.
it's short. But it's short-lived.
Yeah.
I think the application needs to be done immediately, yesterday.
December
But
deadline, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's pretty quick this time. But but no, they would come through the traditional refugee process, and process at a platform, or in a third country if there's an RSC capabilities. So getting these families to their households, once they get to a platform and start that processing, it would be pretty quick to be able to assure them, as soon as they are able to get on a plane, basically, and get here. But, when you talk to the husbands, they don't understand why their families can't come live with them in their house that they own.
They really don't get that. I
No.
mean, some of these families have really put it out there to get themselves to a place where they can really support a family. We have a guy that's illiterate. He can't read a word. The guy's got tons of money in the bank because all he does is work, and he's getting ready for his family, and he's putting the effort in. His family just hit the submitted line, gotten a PRM, and that's probably not going to make it out before January 20th, right? And we don't, and it's not that, and I don't want to get political. I think just in terms of policy, though, I think we understand some of the changes that are coming. But what is definitely coming is we don't know what the changes will definitely be. So there's a lot of unknown after January 20th. So it's unfortunate now that it's almost even, there's been people like MAA and me and Elizabeth, and there's been tons of other people out there that have been talking about reunification as its own class for a long time. And it is shocking to me that they just literally launched these families into these communities now. And so today, Mass Afghan, for example, we had a call with our school district. So we briefed all the school counselors, and we're like, hey, just so you know, and I can't talk about students, but I could talk about the group. And I would say, listen, there's a good chance these families aren't getting reunited before the next administration. So there's a lot of unknowns. And so the effect on these families being in these communities is very local, it's very real, and it's unlike these other families that are suffering together. I'd rather suffer together with my family, honestly, part like this. And then we're not good facsimiles for a family, right? They can cry to us, they can talk to you, but some of them get really upset. Teenagers get really mad sometimes, and they're like, "You don't care about my family." And I'm like, "Samir, I love your family. I love your family. They're my family, and we're gonna just keep working." But I don't think they feel like the government's on their side at all.
What I see is the same stories being told to us over and over again because nobody's listening.
Yes.
But on as a veteran, and just what we think when we think about the NEO and what happened, my hope is that when we talk about what we want, what our expectations are, what do we see as a future? We've done a lot of work over the last 3 years, and our work's going to continue. I think we've been mobilized here, in a way that nobody ever thought possible. So I think that just understanding that veterans and civilians and the contractors and everybody that worked with side by side with Afghans, we're not going anywhere. So we're going to keep doing the work that we do. And I'm going to kind of not quote, but kind of quote somebody that told me something a while ago, because John will know that we always ask for numbers, like How many are in the reunification pipeline? How many are in the SIV pipeline? How many P1s are, in the system? Like we badger like constantly, give us these numbers, and we get sometimes roundabout numbers, or, rounded off numbers, or it's been a lot, so the one thing that resonated with me, when I kept asking for numbers, and he was like, Elizabeth, think about every Afghan life that was touched by an American over 20 years. And you have your scope.
Yeah.
And that's our number that we're working with. So we're nowhere near the end. We've only touched on the beginning. So, that was a huge moment for me in all of this 3 years in.
Yeah.
And, just that light at the end of the tunnel that we haven't even begun to see yet. So,
well, what gives me a lot of hope is, and it's not just, Terry's amazing. There are volunteers like Terry all over the place, right? And so one of the interesting things for us is we're on like in the middle of it, right? So you got this big DC part, and then there's all these middle, and then there's NGOs that are local. And now you get to see like an Afghan come from the NEO all the way down into like a community and where they live. And then so for Terry, I'd love to know, like, how has learning and becoming a part of Afghan lives changed you? Like, what has it brought to you?
This whole experience has really been amazing. It's not what I set out to do, but it was what I think I was meant to do. I love Afghan people. They're absolutely incredible. And it's also given me a chance to get to know so many people in my community. I'm so proud of my community for pulling together. John and I were at an event the other night, which was really put together by a student. It was a photo video demonstration of her welcome to Harvard. At the event, there was a superintendent of schools, and it was an evening event. It wasn't like this was something easy, but members of the school committee, members of the board of selectmen came, the select board came, excuse me. As I said, superintendent of schools, so many community members came from every church. I have a team of about 40 people that are involved basically with my families, and I've gotten to know them so well. These are people I wouldn't have known well before. Maybe some of them didn't even like me before. I don't know. But it's really been the privilege of my life to be able to do this. And, 5 years ago, I couldn't have done it. And who knows what I'd be doing 5 years from now. But this is what I'm meant to do now. So I'm grateful.
That's so incredible, Terry. Mm-hmm. I can feel it when you talk about it, that the specialness of it all, which is a rare gift, I think. I feel the same way, even though I'm not involved in the way that you are. I would never have, the last 3.5 years almost now have been just a whirlwind, right? Of crazy. John, you sitting there with Zyn packets in your mouth, falling asleep, like during the NEO, all these things that we've all been through, and I just would never have it any other way.
I quit those, by the way, after it was a wreck. It was like a train wreck. But Zyn's got me through the evac. That's true. I didn't have food, so it worked out.
That was just the mental image. I was just trying to imagine that, and you do. I mean, it's wow. I feel like I just teased. If you all didn't get the reference, you have to watch the second episode with John about the 68 miracles. Right? Is that?
Yeah, 68 miracles. It's essentially when the families were getting out, I wasn't in my best mental state. I had stopped eating food and started ingesting nicotine at like a deployment. It was a deployment for me, and I was like doing deployment things. But
drinking beer at like 10 in the morning too.
Yeah,
like people would drop beer on you. Like this is my nighttime.
That was a wild experience, But just to kind of it's interesting though. The reason why veterans did it, though, is the same reason why Terry just told her story, why she loves the Afghans, right? Mm-hmm. Such an endearing people, and they give of themselves so freely, and you're immediately part of the family and everything. And so when the evacuation happened, and on top of bottoming out and suffering a severe moral injury, I went into deployment mode to save my friends, right? We all went in, we said, we're going to put our head down. We're going to find solutions. We're going to let it fail. And if it fails, we'll find another solution until you find the right set of solutions that get people through. And now we're doing it again. And now we're, talking about reunification cases, because these are people that have been essentially left behind by the system. And it's not the first time we've done it. And all we've really asked for is better communication and some other things. But at the end of the day, these allies deserve to have their families. And it's going to be people like veterans and volunteers and people that have actually gotten to know Afghans and love Afghans that will do that work. So I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to drive crazy as long as
I think that's the thing, is the people who've stuck on this long are not going to give it up. They're going to keep doing it. And I hope that the administration will make that easier for them, because I think a lot of the reason that it's been hard in the past has been that we want to kind of sweep it under the rug, and we do it, but we don't make a big noise about it. We don't want to make a big noise about it. I want to make all the noise about it.
Like, one of the most incredible things our country's ever done, and we weren't really talking about it enough, and that's kind of it's kind of a shame.
Right. We need to recognize there's more to be done here. These are amazing humans, and we put them through this too. We did that, so it's a reckoning, I think, at that level as well. And I just think it's just amazing what you guys have all done, and I feel really honored to hear the stories that you shared and to know just the small amount of the large number of things that you've done. And I don't know if anybody has any parting words that they'd like to share. I'm just going to open the floor up, and, don't all scream over each other at once, I guess.
I just want to quickly focus just on next administration stuff. I just want to make a quick comment about that.
Yeah.
So one of the things that's coming, right, there's going to be a change in the political party. So first of all, I think all veterans are willing to work with the other political party, because I think everybody recalls when you're in a foxhole, there are no political parties, right? And we've sat in the Humvees, Republicans, Democrats, and I think and still hope and still believe that the Afghan veterans of all political parties will still work together to find solutions. That's all I'm really asking from the Trump administration, is just to remember is that we're out here, we're veterans, and we serve together, and we still owe that last bit of gratitude to the Afghan people till the end of the mission, and then we can fight again. We can fight again later. But that's really what I'm hoping for, and I'm willing to work with people to do that.
Yeah. I agree. I mean, I look back when I was in the military, and I don't remember a political party or a political discussion. Like, it wasn't, I think the biggest one was when we got a big raise in the 90s. So, that was the discussion. And I agree. I think veterans, across the board, I think, we're all here. We're not going anywhere, and we all have the same stories to tell. Whether it was, wherever you served, and what your role was, we all have a similar story here with Afghanistan. And, just knowing that our deployment isn't over, and, we really, really want it to be, we want to get those good night's sleep. And we want families to be reunified, and, not waking up every day to the emails and the stories, of people that are separated. And, continuing the conversation and bringing it to light to all the civilians here. They stepped up during, the NEO. You reach out, people don't realize that people are still coming. So, just talking to your neighbors, talking to any group that you belong to, and continuing the conversation and keeping it, front and center.
I love it. How about you, Terry? Anything?
I would say that, as I said, I have a group of maybe 40, maybe more people that work, and I have no idea what any of their political meetings are. We're all just anxious to welcome these people to our community and have them, have a home, because they've left, even if they're here with their families, they've left really everything else behind. And so we are their friends. When my grandparents came over from Ireland and from Canada, they had a couch to sleep on, right? They had people that were going to welcome them here. These people, we are that for these people. We are the couch. We are their family at this point.
That's amazing.
I know cake at the door when somebody comes to the door, the Entenmann's cake. You can cut that out. I was just kidding.
No, I'm not cutting it out. Not at all. So I know that I'm not the guest here, but I'm going to have one final thing that I want to say. And I've said it before, imploring President Biden to do something more, to speak publicly about this issue. And what I've said before is that I used to be, I think, a pretty strong conservative, and I was very I thought I knew what was up, and then Afghanistan happened, and I realized I didn't care about politics anymore, not at all. And my friends who worked on this were from all across the political aisle. It is the only thing, I think, in that crazy atmosphere of the previous times in this country that I felt I never thought that this country would come back together. But for those of us who did this work, I think it did.
Oh, yeah.
And I would implore the incoming administration to take that into account too. This is something that cuts across all political ideologies, and it's something that unites us as Americans, and it's something that is cared about at such a deep level and has caused so much moral injury. And it's just, we need to do the right thing for all of us, to do something great for America, to just a closure on this final chapter of a lot of pain and suffering for so many. I really think that that's a powerful thing that this administration can do. And I had really hoped that the Biden administration would do it. And I just want to see somebody do it. That's all. I just want to see somebody do it.
We've spoken about this before, but I believe that the Biden this administration really owes a bigger thank you to the larger community. I don't think he's really this administration has addressed veterans in a direct way, and I know they've definitely have the administration has people they work with, and they've shown that kind of thankfulness towards, but a lot of people gave up a lot of things, and we've really carried the government now for 3 years, and Biden come out, he didn't talk about it during the State of the Union afterwards. And I've generally been supportive of the administration, and this is one thing where I think they failed. I don't think he spoke to all of the Afghan veterans at all. I don't think he spoke to nearly enough of us out loud. So I agree with you.
Yeah, and I'm not a veteran, but the veterans that I have spoken with say the same thing, and they're not saying it. I recently wrote about this. They don't have a partisan axe to grind on this topic. They just want to feel like the people they lost, the limbs they lost, the time they gave, that it matters for something.
Yes.
And that it's not their fault. This does not weigh against them and their service in any manner. And that's why I think it's so important for an administration to take up that mantle of the weight of, we made some decisions that led to this, and we could have prepared better. And there is blame to go all the way around. I'm certainly not putting it all at the Biden administration's feet. That would be immensely unfair. But yeah, this has been a very painful topic and a very meaningful one. And the Afghan people, like you say, all of you, they are just such lovely people, and we owe them better than they have gotten. So I thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
It's been incredible. I'd like to have you all come back and just tell me more stories at some other time. And I want to thank all the listeners for taking the time, for supporting the people of Afghanistan, whether they are here or overseas in many a far-flung location. If you've enjoyed the episode, make sure that you have enabled notifications for following the YouTube page and all that good stuff. And for now, Tasha Kaur, and hope to see you again soon.
Tasha Kaur.
Thanks, Beth.